The lights were still on. That's what made it harder to understand. Marble floors reflecting perfectly, glass storefronts untouched. And yet, something had already changed. In the first 48 hours after February 28, 2026, at least 10 major luxury ecosystems inside Dubai began to shift at the same time. Not collapse, not panic, something quieter. Apple, Cartier, Prada, Hermes, LVMH, Kering, Chalhoub Group, Ferrari. Different industries, different customers. Same response, doors closing, deliveries paused, staff told to stay home. According to early March retail tracking and financial reports, over $100 billion in combined luxury market value was erased globally within days of the escalation. Dubai, the city that had positioned itself as immune to instability, suddenly felt connected to it. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Ramadan season, peak spending window, nearly 60% of UAE luxury consumption tied to tourism. And yet, footfall slowed. Airspace disruptions, travel hesitation, spending behavior shifted almost overnight. But here's what made it unsettling. The skyline didn't change. The city still looked the same, which raises a question that's harder to ignore the longer you think about it. If everything still looks perfect, but the system underneath starts reacting this quickly, what exactly is holding it together? For more than 2 decades, Dubai built something no other city attempted at this scale. It didn't just invite luxury brands. It engineered an environment where luxury became the default language. Zero income tax, rapid wealth inflow, a strategic position between Europe, Asia, and Africa. By 2025, according to global wealth migration reports, nearly 9,800 millionaires relocated to the UAE in a single year, bringing over $60 billion in investable assets. The number of high-net-worth residents had more than doubled since 2014. That kind of growth doesn't go unnoticed. Luxury brands responded accordingly. Massive flagship stores, regional headquarters, exclusive product launches timed around Ramadan and Eid. According to Bain & Company, the Middle East accounted for the fastest luxury growth globally in 2025, with Dubai driving nearly 80% of that expansion. The narrative became self-reinforcing. Wealth attracted brands, brands attracted more wealth, and the city positioned itself as something rare, a controlled market, a predictable environment, a place where global instability didn't apply the same way. For years, that belief held. It didn't feel like optimism. No, it felt like structure. But structures built on confidence don't fail loudly. They shift quietly. And the moment confidence changes, everything connected to it begins to adjust. The first signs didn't look like warnings. They looked like decisions, small ones. Apple didn't reduce hours. It shut all 5 UAE stores on March 2, 2026, simultaneously. That doesn't happen without calculation. LVMH followed with temporary closures across Louis Vuitton and Dior locations. Kering paused operations across multiple Gulf countries. Cartier halted exhibitions just days after launch. Ferrari suspended deliveries. Chalhoub Group reduced operations across hundreds of stores. Each action made sense individually: safety, logistics, staff protection. But together they formed a pattern. A synchronized response across industries that don't usually move in sync. And that's where it becomes harder to ignore, because these companies operate on data, on forecasts, on risk models built years in advance. They don't react emotionally, they react structurally, which means the shift wasn't about one event. It was about what that event revealed, that the assumption of uninterrupted stability might not hold under certain conditions. And once that possibility enters the system, behavior changes immediately, quietly, but decisively. The data began catching up within days. Stock markets reacted first. On March 2nd alone, LVMH dropped over 3%, Kering over 5%, Richemont nearly 6%, while Hermes saw a broader decline approaching 20% over the following weeks. The Stoxx Europe Luxury 10 Index recorded its sharpest 2-day drop since April 2025. Combined losses across major luxury groups crossed $100 billion in market capitalization within a short window. These numbers weren't just about Dubai revenue. They reflected something deeper: repricing of geographic risk, because Dubai had been considered a low-risk, high-growth environment. When that assumption changes, valuation models adjust instantly. On the ground, the numbers told a parallel story. Tourism projections for 2026 were revised downward, with Oxford Economics estimating potential declines between 11% and 27% in regional arrivals. That translates into tens of billions in lost spending. And in Dubai, where roughly 60% of luxury purchases come from tourists, that shift matters immediately, not gradually, immediately. Then because fewer tourists don't just reduce sales, they reduce visibility. And visibility is what luxury retail depends on. To understand why everything moved so quickly, you have to look at how the system is built. Dubai's luxury economy is not decentralized. It's concentrated, highly efficient, highly interconnected. Large operators like Shalhoub Group manage hundreds of stores, acting as the bridge between global brands and regional consumers. Shopping malls operate as centralized hubs, where footfall drives multiple sectors simultaneously. Tourism feeds retail, retail feeds real estate reinforces perception. It's a loop, a very effective one. But loops are sensitive. When one part shifts, the entire system feels it. And because Dubai optimized for growth, for speed, for scale, it also reduced redundancy. Which means resilience depends heavily on continuity. When continuity is interrupted, even briefly, the system reacts faster than expected. That's not a flaw. It's the trade-off of efficiency. But it also explains why 8 different sectors adjusted at the same time. They weren't reacting to each other. They were reacting to the same underlying pressure. The breakdown didn't look like collapse. It looked like pause. Stores closed temporarily, deliveries delayed until further notice. Operations reduced out of precaution. These phrases matter because they signal uncertainty without confirming duration, and uncertainty is enough to slow everything. Ramadan, the most important retail season in the region, was disrupted. Eid spending windows compressed, high-value transactions delayed. In luxury, timing matters as much as demand. Miss the window, and revenue isn't postponed. It disappears. At the same time, logistics tightened. Airspace restrictions affected supply chains. Insurance costs adjusted. Travel hesitations increased. Individually, manageable. Collectively, disruptive. And disruption doesn't need to last long to have lasting effects, because once systems pause, restarting them at full speed takes time. And during that time, behavior adapts. Consumers wait, investors reassess, brands reconsider exposure, not dramatically, but enough to shift momentum. And in Dubai's model, momentum is everything. The human impact is where abstraction becomes real. Retail workers were sent home with uncertainty. Not layoffs, not yet, but no clear timelines. Sales targets disappeared overnight. Managers adjusted operations daily. For expatriates, who make up a large portion of the workforce, stability is tied directly to employment. When operations pause, so does certainty. For high-net-worth residents, the shift was psychological, not financial. A realization that the environment, while still strong, is not completely insulated. That perception matters, because luxury consumption depends on confidence as much as income. Even among the wealthy, spending behavior changes when uncertainty increases. Fewer spontaneous purchases, more deliberate decisions, and that shift flows downward, affecting retailers, affecting service sectors, affecting the broader economy. The system doesn't break, but it becomes more cautious, and caution spreads faster than growth. There are deeper layers behind all of this. Cost of concentration is one. By focusing heavily on one region for growth, luxury brands increased exposure to regional risk. Then there's geopolitical proximity. Dubai's strength, its location, also connects it to surrounding instability. Then there's tourism dependency. When 60% of spending relies on visitors, any disruption in travel has immediate consequences. Add to that global shifts, slowing growth in China, uneven performance in Europe, changing consumption patterns worldwide. The Middle East had become the fallback growth engine, which means more weight was placed on it. And when weight increases, so does impact when something shifts. None of these factors alone explain the reaction, but together they create a system that responds quickly to pressure, not because it's weak, but because it's tightly optimized. Zoom out, and the pattern extends far beyond Dubai. Global luxury is changing. Now we're less dependent on physical stores, more reliant on digital engagement, more cautious about geographic concentration. Cities that once dominated luxury consumption, Paris, Hong Kong, New York, have all faced similar adjustments in different forms. Dubai's situation is more visible because its rise was faster, more concentrated, more intentional, which means its adjustments are also more noticeable. But this isn't an isolated story. It's part of a larger shift in how global markets operate, where no single city can guarantee uninterrupted growth indefinitely, and where resilience becomes as important as expansion. The realization is not dramatic. Dubai is not dying. The infrastructure remains, the wealth remains, the appeal remains, but something else has changed: the certainty. The assumption that the system would always operate without interruption. That assumption has been tested, and once tested, it doesn't return to its original state. It evolves, becomes more cautious, more aware of its limits. For the luxury industry, this is not the end of Dubai. It's a recalibration, a recognition that even the strongest growth stories exist within larger systems they cannot fully control. And that recognition changes decisions, quietly but permanently. So now the question becomes harder to ignore. Not whether Dubai will recover, it likely will, but whether it will ever feel the same to those who built their strategies around it. Because once a system reveals its limits, even briefly, it changes how people interact with it. Would you still see Dubai as untouchable, or as something powerful, but conditional? I'd share what you think. And if you want to keep exploring what's happening beneath the surface, stay connected, because the most important changes rarely arrive as headlines. They unfold in patterns, and we're only starting to see them.